So now let's talk about what the successful campaigns of 2016 are alleged to have been doing on Facebook. For the benefit of younger viewers, Facebook is an antique social media platform that your grandparents use to share photographs of you. So there are really three things that this technique involves: data harvesting, psychological and political profiling, and microtargeting. The data harvesting, exactly what it says, you collect data on people from their social media interactions. So, in 2016, Facebook sort of seemed to have left things wide open. They've tightened things up since, but you have third-party apps which invite people to play games or puzzles, or to share various bits of information in return for entertainment or services of some sort. And when all this started, some of the apps were able to gather information not just on the people who installed the apps, but on all their Facebook contacts as well. That allowed people to, the operators, to gather an awful lot of data. So you gather data. You gather data on what people like, on what they follow. You may also gather data on what they say. You can very easily find out where they live and what gender they are, and how old they are, and how they vote and so on, because they tell you. They tell you very easily. You can persuade someone to tell you all that stuff just by offering them free Wi-Fi in a town centre. Okay, so you collect all this data. Then what do you do with it? Well, one thing you can do is psychological profiling. So you use the 5-dimension model or something like it. And because you've invited people to do quizzes that ask leading questions that allow you to flesh out that model, you can identify who is prone to neuroticism, who is open to new ideas, who is small c, conservative in their outlook. The other thing you do is profile people politically. And this is important because you want to know who is persuadable. You want to know who's persuadable and what might persuade them. There's no point targeting adverts at people who are already politically committed. So the first thing you look at is to see, are they liking and clicking on and agreeing with pro or anti-candidate sites and content. And if they're clearly committed on one side or the other of your election or your referendum, then you ignore them. You don't send them any adverts. You don't attempt to persuade them because they're not persuadable. You spend all of your attention, all your time, and all your money on people who are uncommitted on the question of the day, of whatever the election or the referendum is about. But also you find out what they do care about. And this is important because very often people don't care about the thing that your referendum is about. This is really the problem that so the Liberal Democrats in the UK, in return for going into coalition with the Conservatives, the prize they got was a referendum on changing the voting system in the UK, but only policy wonks, only people who are committed and interested in politics care about that. So if they wanted anybody to vote for that, what they needed to do is what the Leave campaign did and what elements of the Trump campaign did, which was to connect their rather boring and abstract and complex issue to something that people already care about. The EU is immensely complex and deeply boring, right? It mostly consists of treaties about standardizing the markings on components in electrical goods and stuff like that. Deeply, deeply dull. How do you get people interested in that? Well, If you know that somebody is resentful of immigration, the levels of immigration, then that's easy, right? You say you can, blame the EU for that. Or you can suggest, if you're doing the Trump campaign, you can suggest that the Democrats are, soft on immigration, and that there will be, that your old hometown will be transformed out of all recognition by all these hordes of Mexican Muslims or whoever. Okay, but you might care about the environment, right? So this is one of the things that the Leave campaign did with younger voters, because younger voters on the whole are quite indifferent to immigration. They on the whole don't really care about it very much. They're not bothered. They probably had EU migrants as teachers. It's very likely that some of their school friends will have been the children of, will have parents who were born outside this country. That's very likely. So younger people on the whole are not as likely to be anti-immigrant, but they do tend to be far more concerned about the environment. So what do? You run an advert which suggests that the EU is somehow preventing us from doing more to stop global warming, right? It doesn't matter for our purposes today whether that's true, but the point is you can do the third thing, which is micro-targeting. So you've got your psychological and political profiling. You know who cares about what. You've identified the people who are persuadable. You focus all your attention on them, and you direct adverts at those individuals which connect things that you know they care about to the thing that you want them to care about, right? So this is micro-targeting. So you send your adverts directly to individuals, to their individual news feeds. So, their friends and family and their employers may not know that they're getting this stuff. Or you might send it to carefully chosen interest groups. This is great for three reasons. One, it avoids fact checking, right? If you put up a billboard poster or you send around a leaflet that makes claims of a checkable sort, you can be sure that your political opponents will check it. And if your leaflet turns out to be false or discreditable in some way, I mean, there have been some fairly racist election leaflets gone around in the past, and that turns out to be that always backfires because somebody waves it in the air and says you're a bunch of racists. But with micro-targeting, you're not going to get fact checked. The people who have an interest in checking your facts won't know that you're sending this stuff around. Why? Because the people who are interested in checking your facts and exposing your adverts as misleading or morally off, they're all committed. So you can be sure that they won't know that your micro-targeting campaign is even happening. So this is what happened in the Brexit referendum. Is all this micro-targeting happened. And the Remain campaign had no idea. Why? Because the Remain campaign are exactly the kind of people who they're committed. And it's only the uncommitted who get sent these adverts. And what's more, people tend to clump together. So people who are politically committed, one way or another, tend to hang with each other. And so you're not going to hear from friends and family that, there are these funny ads going around, right? So micro-targeting avoids fact-checking. The other thing that micro-targeting avoids is funding limits and rules about the sources of election funding. So in the UK, in fact everywhere where there's supposed to be democracy, there are rules about how much you can spend in an election and when, what you can spend it on, and who's allowed to supply the money. So usually there's a spending limit, and usually there's something about you know, your money shouldn't come from foreign sources or something. And basically, there's usually a some attempt to pass a law to prevent foreign interests from just buying your election result in your country. And these are enforced partly by looking at the accounts of electoral agents of political parties, but they're also sustained in a more kind of crude way, just by people can see how much advertising you're doing. People can see how many leaflets you're putting out and how many TV spots you've got and how many billboard places you've got. And people know how much advertising costs, right? Because the people in the campaigning business know what the prices are. So they can quickly work out roughly how much you're spending. And if you're spending much more than the rules allow, somebody's going to notice, they're going to ask questions. But with micro-targeting, nobody can keep track of how many adverts you're doing, right? Because the adverts, they appear in a private individual's individual feed at a carefully chosen time, because part of the data that they've harvested on you is what time you read Facebook. So they time the ads, and then they're there for a little while and then they disappear. So there's nothing to check. So you can spend as much as you like on micro-targeting Facebook ads and nobody can check, as long as you don't put it through your accounts. But then all you need to have is just to have some shadow organization that the money flows through, and an army of online warriors who will do the work for you. And as long as they're off your books, then you're going to be fine. It also fuels social proof by sharing, right? So I get this image, this advert that I think, yeah, absolutely right. Yes, I'm really angry about that, and this meme puts the point really well. I'm going to share it. So then I start passing stuff round. So I become a source of credibility that I lend my credibility to this meme or this advert or whatever for free. Okay, so what I want you to do now is watch Carol Cadwallader's TED Talk, where she gives her version of this. Couple of things I want you to notice. One is that one of the things she said is definitely false, because she says fairly early on that the 2016 Brexit referendum was all online. This referendum was fought out online. Well, that's partly true, but there were rallies. There was an awful lot of regular old-fashioned broadcast airtime and discussion and campaigning in the regular print media. She doesn't know any more than I do exactly how many votes the online campaign swung. It's possible that the number of votes changed by the online campaign might be less than the winning margin of the successful campaign. She doesn't know that, and neither do I. Another thing to notice is that she says that various bodies and individuals are under investigation by the Electoral Commission or by the police. Notice she doesn't talk about convictions. She doesn't say that anybody's been found guilty. And those, different things have happened to different investigations, but you should notice that she isn't able to point to a big thumping legal success. Something else I should say is that since you are going to watch Carol's TED Talk, you should also read the bit of Dominic Cummings' blog, which I'm going to put the link in the notes for you, where he rejects various of her allegations that she makes against him. If you're going to hear from her, you should hear from Dominic as well. Okay, so watch Carol Cadwallader's TED Talk. And then I'll say a little bit more about where I think we are with all this.